So good morning, everyone. Uh, yes, we are talking about courage. We are on the week of the lion. So we are rejoining Dorothy this week with her friends on the yellow brick road to Oz, or as I like to call it, the path to enlightenment. She has her scarecrow, his brains, thoughts, and knowledge, the knowing. Tin Man has joined her with his heart, love, compassion, and empathy, and her ever present Toto, which is life and play, her comfort and companion. And they're walking along and they enter into the dark forest. And what do they say? Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Now, we know in this teaching what we focus on manifests, right? So, what are our lions and tigers and bears? What are we focusing on? And maybe it's that big picture things like politics right now. That's pretty all consuming in my universe. Maybe it's climate change or wars. Maybe it's a little closer to home, and our lions and tigers and bears are financial security, our health, safety of our loved ones. I can't tell you how many times I have thought one of my cats has gone missing only to find it snuggled up in a closet or a cupboard, just like, what's going on, Ma? And I've been freaking out, panicking, thinking the worst, of course. I'm checking the streets. They're like, what? Maybe it's just basic needs such as housing, food, clothing, education. Or I love the not enoughs. I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not educated enough, I'm too educated enough. All of those not enoughs can turn into our lions and tigers and bears, where we start to focus on them and they grow in our minds into something giant and scary. Are we manifesting our fears? So Dorothy and her friends are going through the forest, lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
And what jumps out of the forest? A lion. And he scares everyone. He comes out, he's roaring, he's all claws, roar, 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 and he starts chasing Toto around. And in a moment of bravery, Dorothy steps up and smacks him on the nose. How dare you chase such a small little creature? It's like, I know. I'm nothing but a coward. And in the book, I'd like to share how the lion describes himself. They've all met. Scarecrow says, the king of beasts shouldn't be a coward. And how often do we have people in our lives telling us how we should and shouldn't be in a particular moment? And the lion replies, I know it, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. It is my great sorrow and makes my life very unhappy. And so we get this idea in our heads and we decide how we are, right? And it might not be the truth of ourselves, and usually it's not. But we get unhappy because we believe this lie about ourselves. And then I love that the Tin Man, he suggests, well, perhaps you have a heart disease. If you have, oh, no, I forgot the other part of the lion. So the lion's like, I know it, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. It is my great sorrow and makes my life very unhappy. And then he says, but whenever there is danger, my heart begins to beat fast. The Tin Man suggests, perhaps you have a heart disease. If you do, you ought to be glad because it proves you have a heart. And so how often do we head into a situation and we're nervous? Our body physically starts to tell us, beware. But do we honor that? Do we stop? Do we allow those nervous, anxious fears to stop us? Those false evidences appearing real? Do we become that cowardly lion? Or do we face everything and respond and step into our courage? The thing with the lion is his cowardice is in his head. He believes himself to be afraid. He believes that he is a coward. And so that's how he experiences himself. And yet, he is actually the embodiment of courage. Even before Dorothy goes over the rainbow into Technicolor land, she's balancing on the fence between the pigsties at home. And she falls into the pigs. And the character, let's see, his name is Zeke, is the farmhand name, played by Bert Lahr, who's the lion. He jumps in without even thinking to rescue Dorothy. As the lion, he courageously faces the flying monkeys, the wicked witch, and just protecting and being that guardian of Dorothy and her friends. And in L. Frank Baum's book, because I'm actually using that when I'm doing talks as additional source material because I found it really fascinating, the differences between the book and the movie. They face many other challenges that the movie just didn't have time and space for. And one of them, they come across a chasm. And it's everybody's looking at it, and the lion's like, I think I can jump over that, and I think I can carry each of you. And the scarecrow, with his brains that he doesn't realize he has, he volunteers to go first because if the lion doesn't make it and they fall down to the rocks below, the scarecrow's like, well, I won't get hurt. I'll just fluff myself back up and I'll be fine. Whereas if Dorothy and and Toto go over, they'll be dashed to bits. And if Tin Man goes, then he's just going to be all bent and broken too. And the lion's like listening to this, going, well, what about me? I'm the one doing all the jumping, and I could die too. But he does it, and they do it in that order, and he gets everybody across. And mind you, the lion is jumping with a passenger, and then he has to jump back. And so he's making this jump to save his friends, to move his friends forward on this journey, knowing full well that he could die too. In Jean Houston's book, she quotes Julia Hill, Butterfly Hill, who was the woman who camped in a tree to save the trees back in the 80s, I want to say. She says, real courage is the space when ordinary becomes extraordinary. It exists when any person faces fears and insecurities and chooses to act anyway. And so each of us has had numerous challenges in our lifetime, those many forks in the road that has determined the trajectory of our lives. Jean Houston says, we should all take a look in the mirror. The most courageous thing you've ever done is agree to be born on this planet. Congratulate yourself that you have made it to this point in your life. You couldn't have done it without courage. In fact, you are courageous every time you get out of bed in the morning, put on your clothes, and head out the door. It is a profound job to be here. So I'd like you to take a look at your life, the course of your life up to this point. Notice those points of choice. Did you choose the harder or easier path? How about those times where you responded to a situation without thinking? You just dove in head first, compelled by love. Notice the people who have accompanied you, whether they've accompanied you for a short period, a reason, or for a season, for a longer portion of the journey. Acknowledge the faith and trust you had or that you gained from these experiences. Now, from this present moment, look at your life as it is now. What are you carrying that no longer serves you? Can we have the courage to forgive? For me, forgiving is releasing myself from past traumas, past harms. I have to accept what happens, and that doesn't mean that I like it or that, it was something that maybe I, want to experience again. I don't have to like something to accept it. I just have to acknowledge it happened. And then I bring love into it. Spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. I recognize that whatever happened and whoever was involved, we were all doing the best we could at the time. And even those that have experienced profound hurt and harm, We have to recognize where those people are sick. We don't have to have them in our lives anymore, and we don't have to put ourselves in situations that would potentially harm us. But are we carrying something from 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years ago and still allowing that to affect us in present time? Forgiveness releases from our mind. We can release them from our hearts. And to aid us in that, we can pray all the good things that you want for yourself for them. And in a Mary Morrissey tape, she uses an example of a guy that's just like, I just cannot forgive, let's just say father. I don't know who it was in his situation, but I just cannot forgive this person. And he's like, but I will do that. And I'm going to preface this, God, if it is not your will that they get hit by a bus today, I want them to have all the wealth and happiness and everything. And it got him through until he got to that point where he honestly could release that person with love. So do we have the courage to forgive? Do we have the courage to be grateful? When things don't look like the way we want them to, can we be grateful anyway? Can we bless the good? Because we know that in this teaching, we know giving thanks multiplies what is already there. And I love, the story of Jesus, and he's, talking to the multitudes, and it gets dinner time, and he asks for some collections, and he gets a few fish and a few loaves of bread. And he doesn't say, geez, this isn't going to feed everybody. He says, thank you, God. Thank you for this bounty. He passes it out, and everyone is abundantly fed with leftovers to spare. Do we have the courage to be our authentic self? Can we be true to ourselves without compromising ourselves? I know I have spent a lot of my life trying to figure out what you think I should be, kind of like the scarecrow. You shouldn't be afraid. Well, sometimes it's appropriate to be afraid. Sometimes it's appropriate to be something. And I've spent a lot of my life trying to figure out what you want me to be and trying to be that, not being true to my authentic self. So today, that is one of my goals, that I show up, I be present as me. And I still be in integrity with an open heart and an open mind. And of course, when I think of courage, I think of the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, those past, the people, the places, the things, the courage to change the things I can, which is myself and how I respond to the past, to the people and places and things, and the wisdom to know the difference. So now let's look forward. We're looking towards the Emerald City, and everybody has their wish. We want a brain, we want a heart, we want some courage, we want to go home. Toto's just having a good time. He's chasing butterflies, trotting along, loving his Dorothy. But everybody wants something, right? So what does the road ahead look like for you? Identify your lions and tigers and bears as you look to the future. Is it difficult relationships? Health and financial stuff? Those ever-present not enoughs? And allow yourself to be vulnerable as you look at this. Brené Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And vulnerability is being open to potential harm. And in his book, The Four Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves, Dr. Sean Ginwright says that most of the time, the thing that stands in the way of our truth-telling is the fear of being hurt, harmed, or rejected. Practicing vulnerability also means that we use terms like, I'm curious, I'm feeling confused, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling afraid. Can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable? Can we admit that sometimes being afraid and our heart racing is okay when we think about making changes? And like Dorothy, we call the people into our lives that will help us along our journey and help us to see our full potential. looking at the world through lenses or mirrors. And that's Jen Wright's first pivot of the 4 pivots. Are we looking through life through our lenses, through our perceived ideas of what is and our experiences? Or can we look at life with a mirror, allowing the people around us to reflect back to us those qualities that either we have or that we believe we lack? The scarecrow reflects brains and intelligence. You know, Dorothy starts her journey as just an innocent little girl, unhappy with the way things are in her gray life. It's actually sepia tone in the movie. I noticed that. In the book, it's very gray. Everything is gray. The Tin Man reflects compassion, empathy, and love. And in the book, at one point, he accidentally steps on a bug, and because he thinks he has no heart, he is extra mindful because he is crushed that he crushed a bug. He killed something. And so he walks through life mindfully, not to do any more harm because he believes he has no heart. The lion reflects courage to take action in the face of danger. And so who in your life reflects your strengths and your perceived weaknesses? Going back to the book, and towards the end, they've done all the coming adventures in the next couple weeks. The Wicked Witch has been melted, and they've come to get their rewards. And the wizard sends them off. He's like, okay, I'll see one a day, come back one a day, you know. And so Scarecrow has got his brains, Tin Man has got his heart. And the lion says, but how about my courage? Asks the lion anxiously. And Oz responds, you have plenty of courage, I am sure. All you need is confidence in yourself. There is no living thing that is not afraid when it faces danger. True courage is in facing danger when you're afraid, and that kind of courage you have in plenty. Perhaps I have, but I'm scared just the same, said the lion. I shall really be very unhappy unless you give the sort of courage that makes me forget that I'm afraid. So Lion comes back on his appointed day. He says, I've come for my courage, announces the lion. Very well, says the little man, I will get it for you. So he goes to a cupboard and reaches up to a shelf, gets a square bottle, the contents of which he pours into a beautiful green and gold dish. And he places it before the cowardly lion, who sniffs it like he doesn't like it. And the wizard says, drink. Lion's, what is it? Well, answered Oz, if it were inside you, it would be courage. You know, of course, that courage is always inside one. So I'm just going to leave that there. The lion drinks, and now he feels full of courage. So our courage always lies within us. We can't find it outside. Probably was just some nice water that he poured out of a beautiful thing into a beautiful bowl. But it's all in our heads, right? The lion believes he is drinking courage, and so he is courageous. So let's befriend those lions and tigers and bears. So Jean Houston, in her book Wizard of Oz, says, we can no longer afford to become overwhelmed by all the changes going on in the world around us. We have outgrown the small story of our lives and the small selves to which so many have confined themselves. It is time to acknowledge that the universe resides within us. It is time to embrace higher ways of being for our new era. It is time to move through life motivated not by guilt or obligation, but by gratitude and an abiding zest for doing the things that are called forth by living out of our higher purpose. So, do we have courage to have difficult conversations? You know, Jesus reminds us that it's easy to love our friends and our neighbors. The real courage and the real challenge is loving our enemies. And in a recent blog, Jewel Kinch Thomas in her article, What Courage Looks Like, says, courage is having difficult conversations about differences that are not laced with contempt and wrath. And this is mindfulness. Again, we have the scarecrow. She says courage is ensuring that respect and empathy are the starting points of all interactions. And there we have the Tin Man with his heart. We bring in the St. Francis prayer where we seek to understand rather than to be understood. And we recognize that in God and Spirit, there are infinite opinions. Each one of us in this room has an opinion. And while some of us may have similar opinions, we each have our own individualized opinion about any particular topic we care to name. Can we truly listen and understand the other's point of view? And I heard yesterday in a webinar, somebody, I'm a fellow minister, well, not fellow, I'm not a minister yet. She said, you know, we have to recognize that this is a giant costume party of God and that we are all God in expression. Do we have the courage to take action? I invite you to identify a cause that is something that really pulls you. And just pick one. I know that there are lots of things, you know, with democracy, human rights, global warming, unhoused, addictions, wars. You know, the list is almost infinite, and sadly. But pick something that strongly resonates with you. And this is kind of using your mind, you know, just logically, this needs fixed. And then ask yourself, what about this cause draws you? What excites you? What calls to your heart? That is where the enthusiasm lies. And then promise yourself to say yes that any actions that present themselves, and this is our courage. And I was joking with Reverend Ronnie this past week. I had a nice chat with her, and I was saying, you know, since I agreed to cover for her today, and I've been looking at courage, there's been all kinds of quotes and things all coming into my life to support me in looking at where am I courageous and stepping into things, and where am I not backing off? And so in the last couple weeks, I've joined an organization called Country First. It's a bipartisan group organized by Adam Kinzinger. I've subscribed to a leadership blog that has inspiring stories initiating change. Yesterday, I attended CSL's Diversity and Inclusion webinar titled Our Vision, Our Voices, Our Vote, a Practical Guide for Civic Engagement. And CSL is also sponsoring, and I've joined this as well, 100 Days of Mindful Practice starting on July 28th, going through November 4th, Election Day. And this is leaders throughout the New Thought movement who every day is going to be offering an inspiring thought to help us ground ourselves from now until Election Day in a higher thought about everything that is going on. And I'm going to send Marianne the link to make sure that that information is in the newsletter this week if you'd like to join that. And I'm promising myself to volunteer my time locally. That has not appeared yet, but I am promising myself that I will actually do more than just join things and read and, you know, do things. I'm actually going to take an action. And so I invite you to do the same in whatever way that you feel comfortable participating in the change that you want to see in the world, because it is by integrating our mind, heart, and courage that we can change the world into that world that works for everyone. And so I'm going to close with a quote that I have on a wall in my home by Canon Farrar. I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do. Thank you. And as Michael gets settled, I invite you to, if it's comfortable, close your eyes as we take that into prayer. knowing that there is only one love, one life, one divine creative expression, creating everything that we are experiencing here today and throughout our lifetimes, because we are God in expression. We are the costume party, God's costume party. And we are here to play and experience and grow and become more, experience more of who we are. Knowing that we are divine expressions of God, I know that there is nothing that we can't do when we set our hearts, minds to it, where the courage comes from deep within us, knowing that we have the power of spirit behind us. And so I know that we can change the world. We can bring about a world that works for everyone, one day at a time, one person at a time, that we each have a unique gift that only we can bring. Each of us with our divine, perfect experiences, that we validate everything that has got us to this moment of now. I know it and declare it is good. And we bring that knowing and experience into the future as we walk this yellow brick road, this path of opportunity, this path of enlightenment, as we head towards this beautiful, beautiful world. And so I just, I'm so moved. I just declare that each of us is inspired to move, to take action. However that looks like, I know it is divinely perfect for each of us. Because no two people need to be or do the same thing. Everything is perfect. Every bee, every ant in its colony is divinely perfectly placed for the collective of the whole. And so I am grateful. I am grateful for everyone who says yes. And I'm grateful for everyone that says, I'll think about it. Because I know that we are all walking this perfect path. We are all walking this perfect path together. I am grateful for this time together, and I release this word knowing it is done. It is complete in the mind of spirit, and so it returns joyfully, perfectly, beautifully expressed. Releasing this word, we let it go, we let it be, and so it is.